Hello everybody, today we're talking about kitchen equipment and the names of it and what it would be used for that you may be using for food preparation in the future. So we're going to start with just some various cooking utensils. First one is called tongs. And tongs are very versatile. They're usually used to grip and pick up things like hot items or bulky foods. So examples, maybe you have corn on the cob that you just boiled in water and you use the tongs to help pick them up out of the boiling water. Or maybe you're serving salad, or maybe you're taking chicken off the grill. Next one is called a kitchen fork. And a kitchen fork usually is used to hold meat in place, especially when you're carving something. So if you're carving turkey or ham for Thanksgiving, it could also be to take meat off the grill. Next is a pastry brush, and there's various types of them. There's the traditional bristle brush, and then there's also the silicone brushes. I personally like the silicone ones because I think they're easier to clean. Basically, they're used to put sauce on foods or glazes. So maybe it's putting barbecue sauce on the meat on the grill, or maybe you're putting melted butter on top of fresh baked bread. Next one is a whisk. And it's used for mixing or stirring, beating, whipping, things like maybe scrambling eggs to make scrambled eggs, or making pancake batter, mixing those ingredients together, or to make pudding. Next one is called a slotted spoon, and it's used to drain liquids from foods when you're serving. So when you're serving vegetables especially, you have your corn or your peas or green beans, and they have the liquid in there that you don't really want. The slotted spoon is really nice to get rid of that liquid as you serve it to you or your family. This one's usually one that a lot of people argue the name. It's actually called a turner. So yes, SpongeBob did lie to you. It is not called a spatula. And it's used to lift and turn flat foods. So it could be turning pancakes, or taking hamburgers off the grill, or it could be taking cookies off a cookie sheet, making omelets, browning a hamburger. Lots of possibilities. Now going to a spatula, this is one of the two things that are actually called a spatula. This is a metal spatula, and it's used when you're leveling ingredients when you're measuring. So if you're measuring your dry ingredients, we just talked about measuring flour, you want the top level of the flour to be even with the top of the dry measuring cup. So a metal spatula provides a very straight surface to be able to level it. Some people will also use them to frost cakes. Again, it's got that nice level surface to be able to have a smooth cake, frosted cake. Here's the other item that is actually called a spatula. This is a rubber spatula. And it's used to scrape food from bowls or pans or other containers. So it's really good to use if you are trying to get all the brownie batter out of the bowl into the pan, or all the cake mix, cake batter out of the bowl into the pan. Next one might be one that you haven't seen before. This is called a pastry blender. And a pastry blender is typically used when you're trying to mix a solid fat with a dry ingredient. It typically makes a very dry, crumbly mixture. So for example, when you make homemade pie crust, you'll take your dry ingredients, your flour and your salt, and you want to mix it with your shortening so that the shortening is evenly distributed throughout the dry ingredients. And so that pastry blender will help you make that dry, crumbly mixture. It makes more of a flaky crust when you're done with your pie crust. Another possibility would be using it for a crumb topping. So if you're getting an apple pie with that cinnamon sugar crumb topping, or a coffee cake with a cinnamon sugar crumb topping, that's what you use the pastry blender for. You put the cinnamon and sugar together, usually with butter, and then use a pastry blender to cut in and move that fat, that margarine or butter, throughout the rest of the dry ingredient. Next is a wooden spoon, and yes, you can get plastic ones and other versions, but typically your spoons like this you're going to use to stir ingredients together. So maybe you're stirring sauces or stirring the ingredients together for your cookie batter. Next is a colander, And colanders are used to drain water from pastas or rinsing vegetables. So making your mac and cheese, you cook the pasta and then you want to get rid of that water that you boiled it in. Or you're making a salad and you take your lettuce and you put it in the colander and then you run water over it to wash it. Next one is called a strainer. And a strainer, typically you have different sizes of it, but it's to help separate, again, the solid particles from juices or broth. So if you're cooking to make a chicken broth, you could use the strainer to get rid of any solid particles that might be in it. And then a cooling rack. Cooling racks are used to hold baked goods while you're cooling, so it gets that air underneath the baked goods, the bread or the pies or the cookies, so that it will cool a little faster. Next, we'll have our measuring tools, and we just talked about measuring, so this should be a little bit of review. And these are dry measuring cups. So you'd be using dry measuring cups to obviously measure dry ingredients, things like flour or sugar or shortening. And then you have your liquid measuring cup. And so that would be obviously used to measure liquids like milk or juice or water or oil. Measuring spoons, they would be used to measure small amounts of either liquid or dry ingredients. So it might be different spices that you're adding to your spaghetti sauce, or vanilla to add to your cookies, or oil or sugar, anything you need a real small amount. Bakeware. So if you like to bake, there's a lot of different pans that you can use. This is for a muffin pan, and you can use that to make cupcakes, you can make muffins, you can make rolls. There's a lot of recipes online to make individual portions of little pies or meatloaf or a lot of things that are out there, little individual cheesecakes. And so they've become a lot more versatile. And then you have your round cake pans. Round cake pans would be used to make round layer cakes. You could make cinnamon rolls. You could also do a deep dish pizza in your round cake pan. There's also other shapes, so you could have heart-shaped cake pans or square cake pans as well. This is a pie pan, and a pie pan would be used to make pies or tarts or quiches. Still round like a round cake pan, but you can see that the sides are angled. Next is a cookie sheet. And cookie sheets, you can use them to bake cookies or biscuits or rolls. A lot of people call this a cookie sheet, but this is actually a jelly roll pan. And yes, you can use it to make cookies. It's also named after the jelly rolls or pumpkin rolls, where you have that real thin layer of cake and you put a filling in and you roll it up and slice it. It could also be used for baking chicken pieces. You could make pizza. You could put fish on it. You could put fries. A lot of different versatile uses for that jelly roll pan. And the nice thing when you are using this over a cookie sheet is it has those edges, so things may not fall off as easily if you are taking them out of the oven, or if you want to keep the fries on the pan a little bit easier, or contained a little bit easier. Jelly roll pan would be definitely a good option. The next is a loaf pan. And a loaf pan would be used to make bread. So you can make quick breads, you can make yeast breads. Some people will use them to make meatloaf. I actually saw one once that had a grate at the bottom, kind of like a cooling rack that would drain the grease out of the meatloaf. And so that was kind of a nice option. This one is a tube cake pan, and it's typically used for angel food cakes or sponge cakes. It helps to trap the air in the cake when you have that tube in the center. Next, we're going to talk about cookware. First one is a wok, and a wok is typically used for stir fry, so making stir-fried vegetables or fried rice. This is called a Dutch oven, and usually it's a heavier gauge pot. It's got a lid for it, so you might use it for something like making a roast and putting potatoes and carrots with it, or a roast chicken. two different names for this one, a frying pan or a skillet. Typically it's used for browning or frying foods. So maybe you're browning hamburger, or you're making eggs or pancakes. You're making chicken. Lots of possibilities. I think the frying pan is one of the more used pans in the kitchen. And again, it does come in various sizes. And then another very popular pan to use would be your saucepan. Again, comes in various sizes, and you might use it to make soups or sauces, or to boil water and boil pasta. Small appliances, we're just going to talk about a couple of them. The first one is a blender, and the blender is good to make smoothies or milkshakes. Definitely something that a lot of people like to have in the kitchen. The next one is an electric mixer, and that would be used to help blend or beat or whip ingredients. It would definitely be good to use to make cake batter. Makes making homemade whipped cream a lot easier. Frosting is a lot easier to make with an electric mixer than trying to do it by hand. Cutting equipment, things that you would definitely want it to have with you would be a cutting board. There are two types, and we've talked about this with kitchen safety, that you have your plastic and you have wood, and you want to make sure that if you're cutting meat, you'll use a plastic cutting board to prevent cross-contamination. But they're used so that you can protect your counters. It also helps prevent cross-contamination, because then you can take that cutting board and wash it with hot soapy water before having other things come in contact with that surface, instead of just leaving it on the counter. This is a peeler, and a lot of times you're going to use that to take the peel off of vegetables. Things like potatoes or carrots or cucumbers are things that you definitely could be using a peeler for. And then a grater. They tend to be very sharp, so it's something you have to be very careful with when you're trying to cut foods. But you're cutting them into smaller pieces or shreds. Typically each size has a different size of shreds that you can make from them. So you could shred carrots or cheese or zucchini, or you could shred a lot of potatoes to make hash browns, things like that. We're only going to talk about a couple knives. We'll actually get back to talking about some other types of knives later on. This is a serrated bread knife. So serrated means that if you look at the edge of the knife, it has what looks like little teeth, that saw blade kind of edge. And that's good for using to slice bread, especially your yeast breads, because if you use that to make a sawing motion, it doesn't smash the bread as you're trying to cut it. And then this one's a smaller knife. Paring knife is usually good when you're cutting small fruits or vegetables. It's used to pare or take off the thin peel of your apples or pears, things like that, or vegetables as well. So if you have any questions, please let me know. We're going to be reviewing these and talking about them. Obviously, there's a lot of other things that you could use this equipment for, and there's also a lot of other ones that we didn't talk about, but some of the main ones I tried to focus on. So again, if you have questions, please let me know, and have a wonderful day.